The comic industry has been consumed over the last several days by allegations against Warren Ellis and others for, well, what did he do exactly? Let me try and break that down. Hey everybody, this is Perch. There's a lot of takes about this Warren Ellis situation, and it's disappointing on a number of different fronts, but it's not terribly surprising. I've talked on this channel a lot about the problems the comic industry has. Uh, People often identify it as nepotism. I've talked about it as within a circle or a network, but there's a fundamental issue with how comics creators are hired, how networking exists, how people put some pressure on each other to how they succeed in this industry. And I feel like a lot of people are kind of missing the story here as we either go to Warren Ellis did bad, he should be removed, or Warren Ellis really did nothing but flirt. And, this is a witch hunt, basically. There is a deep problem in the comic industry, but it's really Warren Ellis, and this entire situation is more of an outcome. It's not the core problem. And in in a very, very strange way, the person I see talking about this that has probably the closest view of mine is Kelly Sue DeConnick, who did do a post either 1 or 2 days ago where basically she said, hey, there's a fundamental issue in this industry where people are allowed to be hired based on kind of friendships and you can either have an agent or not, but it's kept as kind of friendship networking and not like something professional. Now, she goes off in some, how to fix it directions that I think that I disagree with, but her core premise there is right on. And it's basically that you have these big publishers. So here, let me back up a second. If you're talking about Marvel or DC, or even to some extent Image, Boom, IDW, and this is going to be a wake-up call for some of those companies, like, say, IDW, that wants to get sold, you have to have a mature, disciplined business. You have to have an HR department that, actually functions. You have to have hiring practices that are defensible in court. And the reality is comics has always kind of kept itself small. In the weirdest possible way, almost all the videos I've done over the last year all touch on this in different ways. That the comic industry, resists change. It resists maturity. It resists actual putting structure in place. And oftentimes why it resists that is because the people want to be artists. They want to be creative. They don't want to get in front of the creative process. They don't want to block any of that. So the idea of agents and formality and hiring practices and social media policies and all of these things tend to be ignored. What's strange about this Warren Ellis situation and this in general is that you see a lot of comic creators talking about how they don't need policing. They don't need for the corporation to come in and enforce, this policy or that. We've seen lots of that. We've also seen the comic industry brag about how it's a very small, tight-knit community. Okay, but one of the consequences of a small, tight-knit community is exactly this. It's where when there's problems, they're much easier to get out of control. There's much less regulation in terms of, if somebody does something bad, who's there to stop it? A lot of these situations that happen around, people getting hired for the wrong reasons, or in the case of this particular situation, people who are kind of allowed to do more than they should. There's not training. There's not mentorship. There's no one to tell them, hey, this is not how you do it. You need to do it this formal way. When people in comics have actually pushed for some standards, they're in many ways, dismissed or in some cases shunned. There's been editors in the past. I mean, I'll give you another example, and there's many here, and they don't all perfectly fit. But when Jim Shooter in the 80s actually put in place a number of standards and rules for how comics are going to be produced and published, there was a very strong backlash. He was successful for a period of time, but ultimately the backlash came, and you saw people like John Byrne and others celebrate when he was fired. I mean, often in really kind of immature ways where he was they drew his hometown being blown up in an issue of comics. Now, that stuff is good for kind of jokes. It makes for funny videos where we can talk about kind of these kind of hijinks. But this isn't healthy. This isn't a good thing. And I think, tying all this stuff together, by the way, there's some people right now who are going to listen to this saying, oh, this is a lot of kind of mansplaining about how, the one guy's situation, in this case, Warren Ellis, people are blaming on a bigger problem in the industry. But there is a bigger problem in the industry. So as we get back to Warren Ellis, what did he do in particular? Well, he got to be popular. He got to have a name and a reputation and, the ability to have a secure job in comics. And then he reached out to women, younger women, not underage women, although everybody stopped short of saying there's a crime, because there isn't actually a crime that took place. It's just skeezy behavior. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of this has been allowed to go on, is because there's not technically a crime being committed. It's just he would flirt. And I'm not going to, there's been a lot of takes around, hey, if the women didn't like it, they should just not talk to him. That sounds good, except keep in mind that over the last 2 to 3 years, we've heard a lot about how when an editor dislikes your politics or dislikes you as a person, they can basically, silently blacklist you from the industry. And a lot of people have made videos about how that's a problem. And it is. That is a problem. It's kind of the same thing when you have a creator who flirts with somebody and encourages them to, talk dirty to you online. I mean, a bunch of stuff that's just gross. But when they do that, and if you don't comply, if you don't go along with it, you kind of lose work. That's the problem in the industry. So a lot of people are talking about Warren Ellis, and this term Bluebeard is coming up a lot, a guy who kind of grooms young women and then drops them for a younger, hotter woman and everything else. That's personal bad behavior. And ultimately, that's Warren Ellis is going to have to come to grips with that in his life. That's going to be something he's going to have to answer for personally. The true problem, though, is that the comic industry is built in such a way that this kind of stuff can go on, and people turn a blind eye to it. And by the way, it's not just, I'm seeing all these tweets like, this is the problem with cis white dudes exposing their power. Yeah, except there's a lot of people who are not white, not dudes, who do the same kind of stuff, who basically exploit their position in order to get people to kind of go along. And if they don't go along dogmatically, they get bumped out of the industry. And that's a big problem. That's not how comics should work. It's not how any business should work. So should Warren Ellis be run out of comics? Well, he's going to be. He's going to be allowed to finish his Batman story that he's doing, the limited series. But, you're not going to see Warren Ellis pop up in comics for a while. He's going to disappear. Is it fair? No, I mean, it is and it isn't, right? I think, doing that kind of skeezy bad work environment place in most normal businesses would get you fired. That is the fair part if his career suffers. The unfair part is that this is still going to go on. And even when you see these tweets of people saying, hey, we support victims, okay, great. Whatever label you want to put on it, good, support these people. But when the next sentence is, hey, send me a DM and I'll make sure and get you work. No, that's exactly the same problem again. Because there are lots of people in comics who will tell you, take out the sex part of it. If you get on the wrong side of a clique, they will suddenly, you won't work anymore. A lot of the same people who are making a lot of noise ran these same kind of scams, ran these same kind of guilt pressure trips on people to say, either go along with it with me, or, I just don't talk to you. I shun you. I ignore you. Warren Ellis was tied up in sex. A lot of the others are just tied up in, hey, you need to go along with what I say, or I'll go find other friends who can. And that's the problem that needs to be fixed in comics. Hiring practices should not be based on who you're pals with, or if you pass some kind of weird fraternity sorority test to get in with your buddies. That is the core problem that, frankly, a lot of us have been facing and talking about for the last 3 years. Warren Ellis is just one piece of it. And time will tell if the world is going to look at this and say, oh, yeah, it's definitely based on sex and that was all there is to it. Or if people will start to poke their head up and go, you know what? The way that we're hiring and the way that we're staffing these comics is fundamentally broken. And we've got to fix that. And in that respect, yeah, wonder upon wonders, Kelly Sue DeConnick and I agree. Agents, formality, business practices, we need to treat this like a business. I get it's creative and everyone wants to keep it fast and loose, but when you keep it fast and loose, this stuff happens and it's going to continue to happen. In the next 5 years, you're going to see more instances of this. You're going to see, and it's not going to be just sex. You're going to see other things come out. You're going to see hey, if I wasn't friends with, this particular female writer or this particular female editor, then they closed their circle and suddenly I had no job. You're going to see more and more claims like that. Now, those aren't as sensational as what happened to Warren Ellis, so it's not going to get the news and the headlines, and it's very much tied into the whole believe women and everything else. But to me, the believe women aspect of this, the Me Too aspect of this, is almost a red herring. We should certainly believe women. We should certainly believe people who are actual victims. Yes. I'm not saying these women weren't, because if you meet some famous comic writer and he promises to help your career and then kind of wants to, basically pressure you into sexting, and if you don't, then the promises of helping your career stop, and maybe he uses his influence to keep you from getting work elsewhere. I mean, that's the allegation. And I know this will disappoint some people, but yeah, I can believe that. I definitely can believe that took place because it takes place all the time in comics. The part that needs to go further is it's not just about a dude exposing himself sexually to somebody else for favors. It happens everywhere. It happens with men, it happens with women, it happens with things that have nothing to do with sex. And that's the broken part of comics. So what all did Warren Ellis do? Well, he got into a position of authority and he utilized it. And in many businesses, if this was, say, pharmaceutical or the tech industry, HR finds out about it, he'd be probably fired. Not probably. A very strong chance he would be fired. If he was just out on the dating scene and dropping one woman for another, people might call him a dog, but wouldn't matter for his career. Whether or not you think that's the biggest sin in the world is up to you. And that's your choice, and I'm not going to make it for you. To me, I think we need to pivot to where the real problem is. And the real problem clearly is that this industry allows people to be hired, fired, get work, not get work, based on very flimsy things that have nothing to do with their skill level and if they're appropriate for the job. Instead, it's based on rumors and innuendo and who you know. And if we want to fix this in comics, that's what we have to fix. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Maybe I'm missing some big piece. So far, nobody has come forward with an allegation of a crime. Many people have posted tweets like, probably nothing is criminal. No, nothing is criminal that we can see. Nothing. Just because it's not criminal doesn't mean it's not bad or skeezy. It's skeezy, make no doubt about it. But the fundamental problems in this industry are going to continue unless we address them. And that goes well beyond men trying to pick up women or get them to sex them. I don't know. The hypocrisy in all this is that Warren Ellis, for a very long time, has made comments about believing women and that we need more female creators and all the rest. And now we see there was a self-serving aspect to it. And I guess the lesson there for everybody is maybe don't be so quick to jump on board somebody else's bandwagon just because they happen to use the right words, just because they use the right slogan. And if you're an aspiring creator, artist, any industry, frankly, be wary of everyone. Look out for yourself first. That's just good advice. Anyway, leave in a comment below if you think I missed something, misinterpreting it. Would love to know. Like, subscribe, follow me on Twitter or Facebook at Comic Perch. You can send me a mail at gmail at comicsperch. Things are a little delayed right now. I'm traveling, so I apologize if I've let a lot of mail build up. I will get to it. But most importantly, thanks for listening.